Save her, or close the deal. The choice should have been simple: $10 million in unsigned contracts versus a nurse he'd known for 3 weeks. But when Park Jin-woo pointed at Amara's collapsed body and told him to let the staff handle it, Kang Minho did something he'd never done in 15 years of building his empire. He walked away from the money. He carried her out of that room himself, and in doing so, painted a target on the only thing in his world he couldn't afford to lose. Welcome to K-Afro Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. 3 weeks earlier, Amara Bennett had walked into Kang Minho's penthouse expecting a routine private nursing case. Gunshot wound to the shoulder, the agency said. Wealthy client, no questions asked, triple the usual rate. She needed the money for her mother's treatment back in London, so she didn't ask questions. She showed up with her medical bag, her professional mask firmly in place, and found Seoul's most feared crime lord bleeding onto thousand-thread count sheets like mortality was something that happened to other people. He'd looked at her with eyes that could have frozen blood, assessed her with the cold calculation of a man who trusted no one, and said exactly 4 words. "Can you fix this?" She could and did, her hands steady even when his lieutenants watched from the doorway with guns visible beneath their jackets. She cleaned the wound, stitched him up with precision that came from years of emergency room experience, and gave him care instructions he probably wouldn't follow. Then she'd tried to leave. "You'll come back tomorrow." Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in a voice that didn't acknowledge the possibility of refusal. Amara had turned, met his gaze directly despite every instinct screaming at her to look away, and set her boundaries like she would with any difficult patient. "I'll come back if you follow my instructions. Take the antibiotics. Keep the wound clean. No strenuous activity for at least a week." "Can you do that, Mr. Kang?" Something had flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or amusement, before the mask settled back into place. "It's just Minho. And yes, I can do that." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight she couldn't quite interpret. "You're not afraid of me." Should I be? She'd kept her tone professional, clinical, even though her pulse hammered against her throat. "Most people are." He'd said it like an observation, not a boast, and somehow that made it more chilling. Most people aren't responsible for keeping you alive. She'd picked up her bag, checking that she had everything. Fear makes hands shake. Shaky hands make mistakes. You don't want me making mistakes with a needle in your shoulder, do you? The corner of his mouth had curved. Not quite a smile, but close. "No, I don't." Then, quieter, almost to himself. "You're different." She was. Different enough that she came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Different enough that she started to see past the crime lord reputation to the man underneath. Brilliant, lonely, carrying the weight of an empire on shoulders that had been shot because someone wanted his throne. Different enough that when he asked about her life, she answered honestly. Told him about her mother's illness, her reasons for coming to Seoul, the dream of opening her own clinic someday where people who couldn't afford care could get it anyway. He listened like every word mattered, like she was the most interesting person he'd ever met. And somewhere in those stolen conversations between wound checks and medication schedules, something shifted. She found herself staying longer than medically necessary. Found herself looking forward to the sessions, to the way his expression softened when she walked into the room, to the intelligence in his eyes when they discussed everything from philosophy to the ethical complexities of the medical field. By the second week, she knew she was in trouble. By the third week, she knew he felt it too. It was in the way he watched her work, his gaze tracking her movements with an intensity that had nothing to do with pain assessment. It was in the careful distance he maintained, like he was afraid if he got too close he'd do something they'd both regret. It was in the gifts that started appearing. Medical journals she'd mentioned wanting to read. Her favorite tea imported from London. A donation to her mother's treatment fund so substantial it made her gasp. "You can't buy me?" she'd said, even as her heart raced at the gesture. "I'm not trying to buy you." His voice had been rough, honest in a way she suspected he rarely allowed himself to be. "I'm trying to take care of you the way you've taken care of me. Is that so wrong?" "It's complicated." She'd sat down on the edge of his bed, professional distance crumbling. "You're my patient. I have ethics, boundaries, and even if I didn't, you're a criminal." He'd finished for her, something bitter in his tone. "A monster. Someone you should run from." "I was going to say you're someone who lives in a world I don't understand. Someone whose life is dangerous in ways mine has never been." She'd looked at him then, really looked, and said the thing she'd been thinking for days. "But you're also the most compelling person I've met in Seoul, maybe ever, and that terrifies me. You terrify me too." The confession had come out quiet, vulnerable, nothing like the controlled crime lord everyone else saw. "I've built an empire on fear and control and never needing anyone. Then you walk in here with your gentle hands and your fierce heart, and suddenly I can't imagine a day without seeing you. What am I supposed to do with that, Amara?" Her name on his lips had done something to her, made her breath catch, and her resolve weaken. "I don't know," she'd whispered. "I don't have an answer for that." "Then don't answer yet, just stay." He'd reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers, and she'd let him take it, even though every professional instinct screamed this was wrong. "Please, stay." She'd stayed, and in staying, she'd sealed both their fates. That's where Park Jin-woo found them on day 21. Minho's shoulder fully healed, Amara checking his range of motion with clinical precision while trying desperately to ignore how close they were, how his breath caught when her fingers brushed bare skin, how the air between them felt electric with everything unsaid. Jin-woo had been Minho's business partner for a decade, his trusted second, the man who handled the dirty work while Minho built the empire. He walked in with contracts that needed signing and an expression that said he'd noticed what Minho had been trying to hide. "We need to talk." Jinwoo's eyes drifted to Amara with calculation that made her skin crawl. "Alone." Amara stays. Minho's tone brooked no argument. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it in front of her." "Interesting." Jinwoo's smile didn't reach his eyes. 3 weeks and she's already in the inner circle. I didn't realize nurses came with security clearance." "Watch your tone." The warning in Minho's voice was unmistakable. "What do you want, Jinwoo?" "What I've always wanted. For you to focus on business instead of distractions." Jinwoo pulled out the contracts, spread them across the desk with deliberate care. "Sign these and we secure the Eastern Territories. 10 million in immediate profit, double that in a year. It's everything we've been working toward, unless you're too busy playing patient to remember what matters." The insult hung in the air. Amara started gathering her supplies, sensing the tension about to explode, but Minho's hand caught her wrist gently. "You don't have to leave. I should give you privacy." The words died as the room tilted violently. Her medical bag slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. The floor rushed up to meet her, and she registered with clinical detachment that something was very wrong. Her vision blurred at the edges, her heart rate spiking erratically. Poison. The tea Jin-woo had insisted on serving her an hour ago. She'd thought it was politeness. She'd been wrong. Through the haze she heard Jin-woo's voice, cold and precise. "Modified cardiac glycoside. Slow-acting but effective. She has maybe 20 minutes before respiratory failure." Papers rustled. "Here's how this works, Minho. You sign the contracts. Let me call the appropriate medical professionals to handle this emergency, and I give you the antidote. Or you refuse. Make this complicated, and watch her die while you play hero. Your choice. Business or feelings? The empire you built or a woman you've known for 3 weeks? Choose wisely. Amara's brilliant medical mind was already cataloging symptoms even as panic clawed at her throat. Muscle weakness progressing, visual disturbances starting, arrhythmia imminent. 15 minutes, maybe less. She tried to speak, to tell Minho to sign, to save himself, that she wasn't worth destroying everything he'd built. No sound came out. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Minho moved, not toward the contracts, toward her. He dropped to his knees beside her collapsed form, his hands impossibly gentle as he scooped her into his arms, and his voice when he spoke was quiet, certain, and absolutely lethal. Get out of my way, Jin-woo, or I will kill you where you stand. You're bluffing. Jin-woo's voice carried false confidence, but his hand drifted toward his jacket. You need that. Antidote. You need me. I need her breathing. Everything else is negotiable. Minho stood with Amara cradled against his chest, and she felt the coiled violence in his body, the absolute control that made him more dangerous standing still than most men were with weapons drawn. You have 3 seconds to tell me what you gave her before I start breaking bones until you do. You'll sign those contracts first. 1. Minho, be reasonable. 2. Jin-woo's mask cracked. Fear flickered across his features as he realized he'd miscalculated catastrophically, had mistaken Minho's careful control for weakness, had thought a woman known for 3 weeks couldn't possibly matter more than a decade of partnership and $10 million. It's a modified cardiac glycoside. The antidote is in my car, black sedan, 3rd level. You sign first, then I. 3. Minho's voice dropped to a whisper. I lied. You don't get 3 seconds. He moved with lethal precision, shifted Amara's weight to one arm, drew a gun from beneath his jacket with the other, and fired. Not a killing shot. Jin-woo's knee exploded and he went down screaming. Minho was already moving, kicking open the penthouse door, barking orders in rapid Korean to the guards who materialized instantly. Find his car. Black sedan, 3rd level parking. There's an antidote inside. Bring it to Seoul Metropolitan Hospital's emergency entrance in 8 minutes, or I'll assume you're working with Jin-woo. Move. The world blurred. Amara registered motion, the elevator descending at stomach-dropping speed. Minho's heartbeat thundering against her ear as he held her like she was made of glass and diamonds. His voice rumbled through his chest, phone pressed to his ear, words clipped and commanding. This is Kang Minho. I'm bringing someone to your emergency department. Cardiac glycoside poisoning, approximately 25 minutes. Post-ingestion. Clear a trauma bay. Have atropine, digoxin-specific antibodies, and advanced cardiac life support ready. If she dies because you weren't prepared, your hospital becomes a memory. Are we clear? Professional, precise. But his hand trembled slightly against her back, and Amara felt the fear beneath the control. She tried to speak, to tell him she understood the protocols, that she could help guide her own treatment, but her tongue felt thick and her chest impossibly tight. Stay with me. His voice cut through the fog, fierce and desperate. Amara, stay with me. Keep breathing. Keep those eyes open. You don't get to leave me. Not like this. Not ever. Do you understand? I'm not letting you go. She wanted to tell him she was fighting, that she was using every ounce of medical knowledge to keep herself conscious and breathing, that she'd heard the fear in his voice, and it mattered more than anything. But her vision was graying at the edges, her respiratory rate climbing dangerously, and all she could do was hold on to consciousness by her fingernails and trust that he would get her there in time. The car ride was a blur of speed and red lights ignored, and Minho's hand pressed against her chest, monitoring her heartbeat with fingers that trembled slightly. She'd never seen him uncertain before, never seen him afraid. The realization cut through her poisoned haze. He meant what he'd said. She mattered more than the money, more than everything. The hospital doors exploded inward under his shoulder. Doctors and nurses swarmed, and Amara felt herself transferred to a gurney. Minho's hand stayed locked around hers. "I'm not leaving." He said it to the doctor, trying to guide him away, and something in his tone made the man step back immediately. "I stay with her. Non-negotiable." They didn't argue. Amara felt the IV line go in, felt medications entering her bloodstream, felt her brilliant medical mind cataloging each intervention even as her body fought the poison. It took 90 minutes. 90 minutes of cardiac monitoring and Minho sitting beside her bed refusing to move, his hand never leaving hers, his eyes tracking every beep of the monitor like he could will her heart to keep beating. When her breathing finally steadied, when the danger passed and the attending physician declared her stable, Minho put his head down on the edge of her bed and breathed like a man who'd been drowning. "You stayed." Her voice came out rough but functional. "I'd stay through the end of the world." He lifted his head, eyes raw with everything he'd been holding back. "I'd walk away from 10 billion. None of it matters if you're not breathing, Amara. None of it means anything without you. You barely know me." Even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. "I know enough." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "I know you're brilliant and brave and too good for my world. I know you look at me like I'm human instead of a monster. I know that when Jinwoo poisoned you, I would have burned Seoul to ashes to save you. And I know I'm in love with you, even though I have no right to be." Before Amara could respond, the curtain swept open and a doctor entered. Young, handsome, with a smile that lingered too long on her face. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Dr. Choi. I'll be monitoring your recovery overnight." He moved closer than necessary, his attention entirely on her. "You're very lucky. Your friend here made the right call." "He's not my friend." Amara's voice was steady. "Boyfriend, then?" Dr. Choi's smile turned warmer. "Well, you're in good hands now. I'll be checking on you personally throughout the night. If you need anything at all, just press the call button and ask for me specifically." Minho's hand tightened on Amara's. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously soft. "Dr. Choi. A word. Outside. Now." The doctor's smile faltered. "I need to stay with my patient. She has 6 other medical professionals monitoring her vitals. She'll survive 2 minutes without you." Minho stood, his presence suddenly filling the small space. "Unless you'd prefer I have this conversation here about why you're looking at the woman I love like she's available when she very clearly isn't." "Minho." Amara's voice carried warning and amusement. "He's just doing his job. His job doesn't require him to offer personal services or look at you like that." To Dr. Choi, "You have 3 seconds to leave this room and find a different doctor to take this case. Someone older, preferably female, definitely less interested." Dr. Choi went pale, clearly recognizing Minho now, understanding exactly how dangerous it was to flirt with what belonged to Seoul's most feared crime lord. "I'll send Dr. Park. My apologies. I didn't realize." "Now you do." Minho sat back down, dismissed him with a look, and the doctor fled. The moment the curtain closed, Amara laughed despite everything. That was completely unnecessary. That was absolutely necessary. His expression remained serious, possessive. "He was looking at you like you were his. You're not his. You're mine. And I don't share." "Yours?" She raised an eyebrow, even as warmth spread through her chest. "I don't remember agreeing to that." "Then let me ask properly." He leaned over the bed rail, his face inches from hers. "Be mine, Amara. Not because you're grateful, not because you're afraid, but because these 3 weeks have meant something to you too. Because you feel this thing between us. Be mine." Choose me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you didn't make a mistake. She should have said no. Should have chosen the safe path. Instead, she reached up and pulled him into a kiss that tasted like hospital antiseptic and desperation and promises neither of them could take back. He groaned against her mouth, careful of her IV lines, his hand cupping her face like she was infinitely precious. "I'll take that as a yes," he whispered. "Conditional, yes." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I need to know this is real. That you're not going to regret choosing me over your empire. Come home with me, let me prove it." They kept her overnight. Dr. Park, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, managed her care with brisk efficiency and no flirtation, which satisfied Minho's territorial instincts. He never left her side, and when she finally fell asleep, he stayed awake watching her breathe. 2 days later, she was cleared for discharge. Minho took her to his penthouse, settled her in his bedroom, and proceeded to take care of her with the same intensity he applied to everything else. He cooked for her, badly, but with endearing determination. He read to her. He worked from the bedroom so she wouldn't be alone. And at night, when she woke from nightmares about poison, he held her until the fear passed. A week into her recovery, Amara woke to find him watching her in the pre-dawn light, his expression unguarded. "What are you thinking?" Her voice was soft. "That I don't deserve you." He traced her cheekbone with gentle fingers. "That you should be with someone good. Someone who doesn't have blood on his hands and enemies who poison innocent people. My world doesn't have you in it." She caught his hand, pressed it against her cheek. "And I don't want someone good. I want someone real. Someone who looks at me like I'm the most important thing in his universe. Someone who walked away from $10 million because I mattered more. You matter more than everything." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Loving you this much terrifies me. Needing you this much. Knowing that anyone who wants to hurt me just has to look at you. Then we'll be terrified together." She pulled him down until they were face to face, heartbeat to heartbeat. "And we'll be careful. And strong. And we'll build something worth the fear." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and full of everything he'd been holding back. When he pulled away, his eyes held a question, a need, a vulnerability that had nothing to do with the crime lord everyone else saw. "Stay with me. Not just tonight. Not just until you're recovered. Stay. Build this life with me." "Yes." The word came out certain, final. "Yes, Minho. I'll stay." What followed was gentle despite the desperation beneath it, was tender despite the hunger they'd both been suppressing. He touched her like she was something sacred, and when they finally came together, it felt less like surrender and more like homecoming. The world outside could be dangerous and impossible, but here, in the darkness with city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, they were just two people who'd found something worth more than safety or logic. Afterward, tangled together in silk sheets, Amara felt his heartbeat against her back and knew she'd made the right choice. Loving Kang Minho would never be easy, but it would always be real. The next morning, Jinwoo's body was found in the Han River. Minho never discussed it, but Amara understood the message. She was under his protection, absolutely. Anyone who threatened her would learn exactly why Seoul feared the name Kang Minho. 3 months passed. Amara moved into the penthouse officially, started working at a private clinic Minho funded where she could treat patients who couldn't afford care. She learned to navigate his world, met his people, accepted that loving him meant accepting all of what he was. He, in turn, softened in ways his organization had never seen, smiled more, came home to her every night like she was the only thing worth coming home to. Then his past caught up to them both. Jinwoo's brother arrived in Seoul with revenge on his mind and 50 armed men at his back. The attack came fast. A coordinated strike on Minho's properties. Minho was across town when Amara's clinic was hit. She heard the gunfire, saw armed men storming through the entrance, and her medical training kicked in. She had patients in the building. Children. People who'd done nothing except be in the wrong place. She triggered the silent alarm that would bring Minho's people, then directed staff and patients to the safe room. Her hands steady even as bullets punched through walls, her voice calm even as chaos erupted. The last patient was a child, 6 years old, terrified, separated from her mother. Amara found her hiding, scooped her up, and ran for the safe room. She almost made it. Then the lead attacker stepped into her path, gun raised. Kang Minho's woman, Jinwoo sends his regards from hell. Amara's mind raced, medical knowledge intersecting with survival, instinct. The man's breathing was labored, his left hand trembling. Cardiac issue, probably arrhythmia. High-stress situation. If she could trigger an episode. She shifted the child to her hip, raised her free hand, and spoke in the calm tone she'd use with a difficult patient. "You're having palpitations. I can see it in your breathing, the cyanosis around your lips. You're on beta blockers, but they're not controlling it. This stress is pushing you into dangerous territory. You fire that gun, your heart rate spikes, and you're looking at cardiac arrest. Is revenge worth dying for?" The man's eyes widened. Surprise that she'd noticed, fear that she was right. His gun hand wavered. Amara threw her medical kit at his face, shoved the child toward the safe room, and dove sideways as he fired. The shot went wide. She hit the ground, rolled, came up with a syringe of epinephrine from the scattered contents, and jammed it into his thigh. Not lethal. But for someone with cardiac issues, a sudden adrenaline surge would trigger exactly what she'd predicted. The man gasped, clutched his chest, and went down as his heart rhythm went haywire. Minho's men burst through the entrance seconds later. Minho arrived moments after, looking absolutely feral, blood on his knuckles and murder in his eyes. He found Amara kneeling beside the unconscious attacker, monitoring his pulse, keeping him alive even though he'd tried to kill her. "You saved him." Minho's voice was incredulous. "I'm a nurse." She looked up, met his eyes. "It's what I do." He pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You're incredible. You're everything." 2 weeks later, Kang Minho stood in a private chapel and married the nurse who'd walked into his life to heal a gunshot wound and stayed to heal everything else. Amara wore ivory silk and a smile that said she'd chosen this fully, had walked into his dangerous world with her eyes open and her heart sure. As he slid the ring onto her finger, his eyes held the same fierce devotion they'd held when he'd carried her out of his penthouse, when he'd chosen her over $10 million without hesitation. "You're mine." He said it like vows, like prayer. "And you're mine." She kissed him, claiming him back, choosing him forever. In a world of violence and danger, they'd found something worth more than any deal, any money, any empire. They'd found each other, and that was everything.